y'all, welcome and welcome back. Happy Saturday. I'm here to scare you with some of your scary stories that you sent to me today. Now, as always, if you have any stories you'd like for me to read, please check out the email below. Send me those stories, long or short, and just put YouTube in the subject line so I know where to read them. But we got quite a few stories today, so I will stop rambling and get right to it. This person said, "Hi, Morgan and Eric. Eric's my husband. I love that. He loves that when you guys shout him out. He's like, they love me. It's like that one scene in The Mask where he's like, they love me. They really love me. Or you. Is it they or you? Oh my god. I'll insert the clip.
You love me. You really love me.
Alright, let's get started. My family has always had the sight. The women can see spirits and entities, but I got blessed with being able to hear them, sometimes even if it's just a whisper. When I lived in Georgia, me and my big sister would hear each other call out our names from different places in the house just to find out that the other wasn't even home or not in the room where we heard it. It would even mimic my mother, or she would hear us call her when we didn't. I think that this story is quite common, but we had what we would call a protector ghost. She was an old woman who took a liking to me and my sister and wouldn't let the other stuff in the house bother us if she could help it. It didn't always work, but I didn't want to imagine what it would be like if she wasn't there. The next story is just my sister's, told from my mother's perspective. I wasn't old enough to remember. My mother wakes up to my 2-year-old sister screaming and crying, so my mother thinks her daughter is being murdered. That's the kind of cry she had. My mom sprints out of her room and sees my sister staring and crying at one corner of her room. My mom picks her up and asks her what's wrong, and my sister says, "I cannot tell you. She doesn't want me to tell you." My mom kept trying to comfort her, saying, "It's okay, sweetheart. I can keep a secret." My sister responds with, "I can't. She's still here." And after that, my mom decided to move out. That was the 3rd time my sister had been crying because something was in her room. The other 2 times, she would wake up to my sister crying because snakes and frogs are coming through the floor again. This was the first couple of many experiences, and I will send more in the future. Thank you for taking the time to read my rambling. That's terrifying. Story number 2. I wanted to submit a story for the longest time, but I never really had anything until today. So some backstory. A house right up the street from me lit on fire around 6 months ago. The whole house is in shambles. When we figured out how it lit on fire, we were heartbroken. Trigger warning. Okay, warning, this is rough. I literally don't know what warnings to put themselves involved. I'll try to censor it as much as I can, but that does happen in the next paragraph. So here's how the fire started. My neighbor had dumped kerosene all over his house, lit it, and then himself in the basement. So now 6 months later, we see the door to this place is open. We walk up to close it out of respect and take some photos of what's inside. I looked at these photos the next day and I see a man, a clear, fully there man. You can see his ears, you'll know what I mean in the pics. He's bald, has a t-shirt on, and is sitting in the same room in the basement where the owner's body was found. I'll attach all the photos and then the zoomed out of the man. I know this isn't nearly as interesting as some of the followers' submissions, but it sure creeped me out. Thank you so much for reading this. Love ya. That is interesting. What do you mean? I get that, someone will tell me the scary story I've ever read, and they'll be like, "Sorry, it's not as interesting as scary," and I'm over here shaking in my boots. That is horrific. Well, the fact that there is so much trauma behind that, his energy was going to be left behind. There's no freaking way. That's either, his literal energy, his ghost, if you will, or residual energy from that incident, because that was horrific. That's always going to be there, I'm sure. All right, story number 3. I have a ghost story and a picture for you. Yes. Back in 2010, my family visited Savannah, Georgia for the first time. I received a book from a family member called Haunted Savannah by James Caskey. Highly recommend. I think I have that book. I am obsessed with Savannah. I've been 2 or 3 times and I love it. That is one of my favorite cities. On the drive there, I read pretty much the remaining 4 hours of the trip. I looked for a hotel, the River Street Inn, in the table of contents, but couldn't find it. I was a little disappointed that it wasn't listed, but soon forgot about it as I read other chapters. We get to the hotel, got our rooms, and settled in before dinner. I opened up the book back on a whim, no bookmarks in the car, and opened to page 26. That just so happened to be the beginning of a chapter titled River Street Inn. Not only was this creepy in and of itself, since I couldn't find a chapter about our hotel before we got there, but as I read the chapter, it details the westernmost room on the 3rd floor, which is supposedly the most haunted. Guess what room we were in? You got it, the westernmost room on the 3rd floor. I would have been shitting my pants. This was just one of many experiences we had on that trip, and it only continued to escalate from there. I'd be more than happy to share this with you too if you want. Please, 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 please. For now, I'll share this photo with you. I took this photo with an older model elf camera with the flash on. It was our second night there, and my parents and I were just walking around outside the hotel trying to catch pictures of orbs. There was no shortage of those the entire trip, and we saw the shadowy mist across the street from our hotel. Minutes after that, we took the picture of Factor's Walk, which sits below our hotel. This is the close-up version. We can no longer find the zoomed-out picture. None of us deleted it. It's just gone. So that was the last story that I had saved, but this is a pretty short video, so I'm gonna hunt down another. This is a non-spooky story, so we're closing it off light. In February of 2021, I lost my dog Rosie suddenly. She was the greatest dog I've ever had, and a person could have a heart dog, it was her. Losing her was one of the hardest things I've ever had to endure. But later that night, after leaving her body with the vet, I was sitting at my desk where I spent a great deal of my time. Rosie would often come in and rest her head on my left arm while I was online. She had a humorous trademark, but I'll get to that in a second. I was chatting with a couple of friends on Facebook Messenger and feeling totally brokenhearted. Then I had a familiar weight and warmth on top of my left thigh. Reflexively, I reached down to scratch her head, but of course there was nothing. And then pure proof that Rosie was visiting me one last time was a fart that smelled so bad my eyes began to water. My nose began to run and it filled the air. I had to get up and walk outside the house. I began laughing and crying at the same time because Rosie's gassy butt was legendary. God, I miss that dumb dog. Thank you for taking the time to read the only direct supernatural event I've ever had. I had a dog. My husband and I adopted a dog from the shelter right when we moved out. It was like within 2 weeks of us moving out because the house was too quiet in 2019. And I loved that dog more than anything else in the whole world. And she got an illness that made her go paralyzed. And within literally 5 days of that happening, she passed away in it was 2022. Oh, I wouldn't wish dog death on anyone. Like, it's the worst thing in the entire world. I have had family deaths that didn't hurt as bad as losing that dog did. But, yeah, it was awful. But there was definitely 1 or 2 times after we lost her that I'm pretty sure she came to say goodbye. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. Whew, I'm gonna shut that down. Ended that on a sad note. I'm so sorry. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you next week. Please have a wonderful and safe weekend.